Hi, buckaroos. This morning, Mr. D is a cowboy. I think it's important sometimes when you can't do or can't be someone that at least you can dress like one. I guess I was an urban cowboy. I didn't have one of those rawhide jackets. In fact, I didn't even have a Western hat. I have one. I just don't know where it's been filed in the house. This morning I'm wearing a golf hat. I don't play golf, but I think I look pretty dapper in the golf hat. You know, as I get older, change a lot of my ideas. And as I've started looking back on life and why I have become what I've become, somebody trying to be a cowboy on YouTube when he doesn't even have a horse and can't keep track of his coffee cup. Coffee. I have to have one of those new fancy one-cup coffee makers. I mean, I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it, how it would change my life. I like the name. I can't pronounce it, but I like to buy things that I can't pronounce the name of them. The concept of one cup of coffee brewed fresh just for me in the morning, that combined with my breakfast of choice, cinnamon rolls. They were such a joy. I'd dream about cinnamon rolls a lot, and then suddenly Walmart, which already had an exorbitant price for a cinnamon roll, they up and raised the price from $2.99 for 4 to $3.48. So on my limited budget, since I feel I should have prime rib and steak occasionally, I've had to forego my cinnamon rolls, hoping that the price might come down. It's always good to dream, isn't it? Well, cinnamon rolls and being a pretend cowboy are not what the video's about this morning. No, this video's going to be different. I'm not going to attack Google because I have a whole bunch of friends on an account that I can't even sign into. And on the K6TPL, one friend. So, I mean, I'm ducked. I've become more pure. I don't say fucked anymore. I say ducked. That'll be okay, won't it? It gets the point across. Not quite the same. You know, when you get right down to it, there is no word that fits as well as fucked. I could never say that in the classroom. So why are you saying it here? That's because I'm old. And you can grant that to old people, right? Ask Peter in London and myself. We both know because we're both old. But Peter doesn't use that kind of language. His training was different than mine. I went to the seminary and I went to a university in California. So I'm different. It's because we are like a computer. And when we are children, this computer that we have inside of us, it's programmed by other people, by teachers, by television, by news reporters, and by ministers. Yeah. But when I was about 8 or 9, I started to write my own program on my computer. And I found, as I've lived all these years, that something goes terribly wrong. Because in that early RAM that's in our mind, that early programming is still there. And as I grow older and I start to change, that early programming comes out. I have had to suffer some grave tragedies in my lifetime. The detachment of every single person that I've ever loved whether it was by a car accident, whether it was through Alcoholics Anonymous, whether it was through some church with twisted words from the Bible. And I have to point out how my life spent living a life of chastity, because the Catholic Church has very strict rules about marriage. And if you're a very good Catholic, then you follow those rules. I've followed those rules all my life. One of the rules that I thought about a lot as I heard this new Pope in the Catholic Church make his statements about not caring for the poor. That's unbelievable. He would tell nuns, "You care too much for the poor." You know, it's funny. Some things are moments when a spotlight focuses down on something that you know is wrong. And when it's exposed, then other things start to unravel. It's sort of like on that coat that I wore for about 20 years, and one day I saw a string. I loved the coat, but I didn't like the dangling string, and that's what happened with me and the Pope. And I pulled on the dangling string, and everything started to unravel. One of the things that as a Catholic teacher, or as a religious brother or priest in the Catholic Church, one of the things they teach you is that anything that you teach from, anything that you read, should have the approval of the Church. And there's a thing in the beginning of any book that's approved for Catholic teaching. And for all my life, I have followed those rules of the Church. I followed the concept that the only books I read were books that had been looked at by bishops and were safe for me to read. And then one day, the Pope said to the nuns, "You'd care too much for the poor." What in heaven's name would Mother Teresa say when he said, "You care too much for the poor"? What would Jesus Christ, our beloved Lord, also think when it's his who said, "What you do to the least of mine, you have done unto me"? So what is it? The Pope doesn't want the nuns serving to Christ? Everything started to unravel. To focus all this in, I must point out, for the first time in my life, I read several books that did not have that informata on the front. One by a minister named Robin Myers. And all the theologians I've read, none focused so in than this Robin Myers. I've looked him up on the internet, and I found him here on YouTube, but I really don't think it's him, because his message is so true and so profound. It seems he would have had thousands and thousands of subscribers. The book I read, and I'm reading at this very moment, is called The Underground Church. The way Christianity was when Christ walked the planet and died on the cross to forgive sin and all that kind of thing. He focuses on that early church, how unlike the churches are today. Nothing like that early church. Well, I'm going to study this a lot more. I just like to do a video occasionally and tell you when there's a tsunami going on in my mind as I think about these things. Can't help but think that Jesus Christ himself, whether he be God or the Son of God, or a profound philosopher, doesn't matter. He is the example. And what he says is pretty important. And he gave us one commandment, cornerstone of a church that has to be underground, I guess, because today churches have flags. This was a mess caused by Constantine when he screwed up the Catholic Church because of his power, before we, the United States of America, thought ourselves to be Rome. Peace be with you, and if you will excuse me.